So it's time to get onto the video for Subtlety when it comes to Prepatch. I've already done one for Outlaw and one for Assassination, so this one will just be as casual as the other two. In this video, I just want to give you guys the tools to PvE or PvP as a Subtlety Rogue at level 110 for Prepatch of BFA. Now, the game is scaled for level 120, so you're not really going to see the full potential of all the specs and classes until BFA 120 with Azeroth bonuses. Subtlety in particular is another spec that scales well late game, so generally Subtlety hasn't had the best scaling early game, as in the more gear you get, the more damage you do compared to the other specs that might have a nice good start early but then not scale as heavily towards the later end of the game. So Subtlety is kind of in that weird spot where we do have a level 120 as a max level, we just can't reach it. We are wearing 110 gear in mythic quality, but still the damage is not quite the same as the pure AoE output of Outlaw or the pure single target output of Assassination. So if you're somebody who played Subtlety and you simply just want to play your favorite specialization, go for it. If you're trying to play specialization because it deals the most amount of damage, I would maybe check out Outlaw or Subtlety depending on what you're trying to do in the game. But Subtlety does have awesome playstyle when it comes to Mythic Plus and a fairly kind of sort of lame sustained based playstyle for single target. But I still want to give you guys the tools in order to show what I mean. As always, go with the timestamps to find the PvP or PvE side of the video. Alright, let's take a look at Subtlety for single target in PvE. What do you want to build yourself? Find weakness, shadow focus for, because you lost your artifact weapon. That's a lot of energy regen that you lost. Mar for Death, as it's just a very good passive ability for the most amount of damage. Then Cheat Death ends up being the best. Soothe the Darkness is a bit of a heal, but not quite as passively there as Assassination's heal. Then Prey in the Weak, if you are going to get stuns, this is really your choice here. But Prey in the Weak ends up being pretty good, like if you do Mythic Pluses, or there's certain adds in a raid that needs to die quick and you can stun them. Then you would want to go Envelop in Shadows. Yes, you're going to be losing your Dark Shadow for single target build, but you're going to be going to Dark Shadow for burst AoE in Mythic Pluses. So Envelop in Shadows has been the best consistent single target build. And then level 100 Master of Shadows for pure single target. Now when it comes to gearing, the stats are going to be, well, kind of depending on your legendaries. So most people are saying right now that the best legendary is Shadow Satyr's Walk, as it gives you extra energy every Shadow Strike you hit. You're playing a more sustained build. A lot of Shadow Strikes, not as big of DFAs. You don't even have DFA on your talent bar actually. So Secret Technique is a close second, but not quite there compared to the good old Eviscerates though. So the playstyle will end up being with your build legendary specific. Shadow Satyr's Walk ends up giving you a lot of energy back, and you'll be able to Shadow Strike literally forever. This combos really well. Kinda can combo with Master Assassin, but if you end up going crit heavy, it's a lot more valuable to go for Insignia or Ravenhold. Insignia or Ravenhold will deal you extra shadow damage because you're doing so many Shadow Strikes back to back to back. I mean, the damage is going to be there, and you're going to be getting a lot of shadow damage. You also are getting a debuff of Find Weakness with every Shadow Strike, and maintain that for as long as possible. As much as possible will give you more damage. So basically, combos well together, so the stats end up being Critical Strike to stack it as high as possible. Then Mastery for that effective finisher damage. Then Haste, because you actually are very energy reliant now. And then Versatility comes at the end, instead of, you know, Versatility and Mastery being the top, while Critical Strike took a backseat because you had the guaranteed Critical Strike chance. Now, this playstyle is, I'll be honest, kind of boring because it's a lot of Shadow Strikes back to back to back, but it is effective in terms of single target damage. I don't have the best gear for Subtlety either. I don't have best in slots, so you'll want to sim yourself if you want to try to get the most amount of gear and the most amount of damage. Another thing I should mention when it comes to gearing, avoid the 4-piece bonus right now for the Antaurus, even if you have the mythic version of it. The 4-piece bonus is broken right now, and it might get fixed in the next few days, so be sure to check it out. Like, you know, equip the 4-piece, try it out, see if it's bugging you. But there's a bug going on with Pharaohs and Subtlety Rogues in particular. Something about our 4-piece bonus sometimes disables our combo point generation. So I notice this sometimes whenever I'm getting my backstabs, Shadow Strikes, I'm going through my rotation, and then all of a sudden backstabs and Shadow Strikes stop generating combo points, usually after I use a finisher. I think there's something about the code where using finisher and then the functionality of the finisher refunding you combo points instead disables all combo point generation for your spec until you do a /reload, or in some cases log on, log off. Will be the worst case scenario if that happened in a raid or a dungeon and you just have to log off, log on mid boss fight, which basically means you're out of the game, you're not doing any damage. So avoid the 2-piece set bonus, I would say the 2% bonus from TOS, if you can get a Mythic Titanforge version of those, is actually pretty strong. Symbols of Death increase your damage done by addition 10%. If you can get full Mythic Titanforge version of the whole TOS set, I guess the Symbols of Death could be pretty good too. Again, sim your character if you're going to be playing this, you know, very, I guess, if you're going to be serious about Subtlety PvE, sim your character every single time. Alright, now that I've talked about that, let's take a look at the spec and how it performs in PvE. So, let me go over the opener, and I feel like most people that play Subtlety PvE, once you get the opener, it helps you ease you into the rotation. So the opener is going to be trying to do as much damage as possible. Already got some foot buffs, already got some raid buffs. I'm going to be using Prolonged Power in the opener, of course. We're going to start with Shadow Blades. Going to get a Shadow Strike on the enemy, Nightblade right afterwards. Full burst of Dance and Symbols of Death. And then going to go into Shadow Strike, Eviscerate, Marfa the Eviscerate. Back into Shadow Strike, starting to maintain the Fine Weakness buff. When you're full on common points, you want to spend onto a finisher. And generally, the playstyle is this. You just Shadow Strike as much as you can, and then spend your common points onto finisher as often as possible. Trying to line up your cooldowns for your burst phases with your Shadow Dance as much as you can with Symbols of Death, because that'll give you the most amount of damage as possible. Feel free to burn as many charges as possible as you can during your burst window with symbols. And try to use Marfa the Eviscerate on cooldown as much as you can. Try to maintain your Nightblade at full. It's best to do that during the backstep build. And Fine Weakness, if you can maintain that at all times, that'll give you the most amount of damage, especially during your burst phases. And your auto attacks, your sustain. There we go. So the playstyle when it comes to Shadow Dance, once you use Shadow Dance, I try to line it up together with Symbols of Death as much as I can. And I try to have at least 2 charges, if not close to 3 available, during my Symbols of Death windows. The rest of the time, I'm just trying to backstab, trying to build my charges up. Generally, you want to use charges at 2 and, like, let's say 20 seconds into the 3rd charge. But it's basically all about trying to save up charges whenever you have your Symbols of Death available. And if you can have your Mark for Death available for Symbols of Death as well, that could also be helpful. Maintain Nightblade at all times. And if you have charges, let's say with Vanish, trying to get that Vanish Shadow Strike in there to continue Fine Weakness, that's the best way of going about it. Now I have 2 charges, almost going to a 3rd. I'm just going to go Shadow Striking here into Fine Weakness. I get my Symbols of Death back faster. I'm just going to continue bursting since I have my Symbols of Death window. Trying to maintain this as much as possible. Eviscerate in there. I'm just going to continue bursting because I have my Mark for Death coming up. So I can get the most amount of damage. So having Dance available, you're really just trying to get Dance available so you can Shadow Strike. No longer are you running a playstyle with Dark Shadow or Night Stalker trying to buff the damage of your Eviscerate. That's not how you play anymore. You're not trying to buff the damage of Eviscerate. The only thing that really buffs your damage of Eviscerate nowadays is only the Symbols of Death. So that's basically the playstyle. It's a lot of maintaining buffs and debuffs rather than trying to line up all the cooldowns for one big explosive DFA, which was, I felt like, a lot more of a fun playstyle. If you're trying to play a more cleave-based playstyle, here's some of the changes you want to make to your talents. Deeper Stratagem, because you'll be generating a lot of common points, and you want to maximize the value from Shuriken Storm. You want to go Dark Shadow for the burst damage. In Mythic Pluses, Night Terrors actually can be pretty good if you're trying to slow down a bunch of enemies, so that's cool to have an AoE slow. And then you want to go Secret Technique as this ability will cleave a bunch of targets. You still want to maintain Fine Weakness. Again, if you're not sure about Fine Weakness and how it'll function, Weapon Master is a good alternative, although you're basically just going to use Shuriken Storm as much as you humanly possible to get those sweet Eviscerates back to back on your enemy while maintaining a Nightblade. So that's generally what you do. You just Phantom Knights on a bunch of enemies and then Eviscerate as much as you humanly can. That's the general basic playstyle. And what you have right now is setups like you would with DFA, but instead you're going to have those setups with Secret Technique instead. So basically trying to pop all the cooldowns in the world. So you want to have your Shadow Dance available with Dark Shadow. You want to have your Symbols of Death available. You want to have your Fine Weakness available if possible to maximize the damage to that one target that you're trying to burst. And if you want to, you can actually change up some of your legendaries. You could drop the ring in this case since you're not using Shadow Strikes as much. For, I guess, the crit versatility will go here. Hopefully you'll have better rings than I do. Oh hey, crit mastery, perfect. And you'll end up wanting to grab the shoulder so you can have a 100% guarantee for the big explosive Secret Technique burst. You can now use your Shadow Blades with your AoE, because Shadow Blades now functions shadow damage from your common point spenders rather than your auto attacks. So it becomes very, very useful when it comes to full AoE damage. So what I'm going to do is pop Prolonged Power, Shadow Blades, What I'm going to do is start with a Shadow Strike in this guy to get the Find Weakness in there. I'm going to spam AoE. Full burst. Here we go. AoE, everybody. And you saw my damage kind of skyrocket. Trying to maintain my burst for as long as I can while I have my Find Weakness on the enemy. So this is where Subtlety becomes kind of fun, is the AoE burst damage you can do because of how many combo points you can spend, how many combo points you can generate. And what's cool about Secret Technique, it actually is a cooldown reduction mechanic. So I'm going to pop all the cooldowns with it. And as I'm spending combo points into Eviscerates, you can actually see this ability coming back faster. If you are in a playstyle where you have like 2 or 3 targets, it's not a terrible idea to put Nibelid on a bunch of them. If let's say you can generate a bunch of combo points, you can get more value out of your damage, especially during your burst. As we'll see in just a second what that looks like. Let's pop cooldowns here. AoE. Bam. Bunch of enemies got hit after like a second delay. So that's basically where the fun of Subtlety becomes, is the AoE playstyle. So the single target ends up being a lot more single target sustain. With AoE, you're trying to get the burst combos. You can try to play burst combo with Subtlety, maybe for like a fight with King Aroth, where the adds take a bunch more damage for a short moment of time. You're trying to maximize that defense, that offensive burst into there. But generally, it's just not quite as powerful as a sustain-based playstyle for single target or a burst playstyle for the AoE. So it's kind of like the things that happened to Subtlety with the artifact weapon being gone, and a lot of energy regen got lost. A DFA being removed. Use a Secret Technique, which is a good competitor for cleave and a little bit of that single target playstyle, but not quite as explosive as a big old DFA. The specialization does become a lot better and a lot easier to play once you get some Azeroth bonuses, once you get the 120 gear, once you get some really strong gear. You actually end up having a playstyle with your Azeroth bonuses where you don't really need to have that much crit, as you'll have Azeroth bonuses that increase the damage of your next critical strike for Eviscerate, or crit rate for Eviscerate, or Shadow Strike, or even your Shuriken Storm. So you can always have that guaranteed crit extra from your gear, so then you can stack points into Mastery and then full after that Versatility to try to maximize the amount of burst damage you can really get out of your spec. When it comes to Subtlety for PvP, the specialization does have a few different playstyles to it. Find Weakness, of course, is going to be the best one at the top. Night Stalker for that glass cannon build is a lot of fun. Mark for Death, because double Eviscerates ends up being, more, instead of getting more value Eviscerates, you're just getting the more Eviscerates, which ends up being pretty good for the spec. So the Darkness ends up being pretty good, actually, because you end up sitting in stealth for a lot of time. Prayer in the Week is almost mandatory, Dark Shadow is necessary, and I would go for Master Shadows. Now, I tried Secret Technique. It seems that this ability has good potential in Cleave, but when it comes to single target, last time I checked it, it was having some bugs. Maybe if Blizzard kind of can standardize it, it'll become our new DFA that can work in single target or AoE, but I feel like if you try it and you're not seeing the damage potential out of it, go for Master Shadows instead, as it has you guarantee for energy regen. So the playstyle for Subtlety for PvP is more or less the same that it always was. You're just trying to maintain Nightblade for as long as possible. But when it comes to your burst playstyle, when you're trying to burst as much damage into the enemy, what's fun is the losing of your artifact weapon trait Finality makes you a little bit more flexible and gives you more freedom in your burst, allowing you to just, instead of sinking, and it sounds bad, at least for 120 PvP right now, sometimes it's a waste of a global cooldown for Nightblade to even be applied on the enemy target. And that sounds weird, I know, but it seems like it's a little bit of a waste. When it comes to your stats over as well, haste ends up being a little bit less effective because you do have that bit of that burst damage, but having some haste is not terrible. Stats that end up being the best are Mastery and Versatility, but having a little bit crit is also good, especially if you end up running Phantom Assassin to supplement extra crit to make sure that your burst ends up being a little bit more impactful. Gonna be better at 120 with guaranteed crit, almost guaranteed criticals. But right now, this is the best you can do currently with the specialization. Trust me, this is fine as is right now. So, you're trying to go for Mastery, trying to get Versatility, but also don't want to skip out on a critical strike either. You can wear the shoulders, but I've heard that the shoulders are reduced critical rate. Like, the chance for crit is reduced in PvP. So, I don't really know if gear should affect you too much in PvP though. I know it does now, but at 110, it doesn't nearly affect you as heavily as at 120, where every bit of stat, becomes even more impactful. Anyway, let's take a look at the burst damage of the spec. It basically plays the same. The only thing you're going to look for is the burst playstyle. My question is, can this train dummy get stunned though? It can. Okay, so I can get my burst set up through that target off the bat. So the playstyle we want to have is dagger. So this is the burst playstyle. And I'm pretty sure you can adjust the playstyle if you want to play in arenas. You know, go for subterfuge so you can get multiple cheap shots. Maybe drop dagger in the dark, maybe to get yourself, well, I don't know, maneuverability. You know, so you have aspects where you can just go for a less bursty playstyle, more of like support for your team. But if you're trying to go ham burst, it's fine to cheese it a little bit with dagger in the dark. Now I don't have war mode on, and in here I wouldn't really be able to use with cold blood or anything. So you would basically want to use cold blood at the beginning, stack up dagger in the dark. You know, you normally sap the enemy for a little bit, let him sit sap for a bit, stack up a bunch of damage with cold blood. You would want to pop your cooldowns for your shadow blades, then shadow strike the enemy, because it's kind of, you want to maximize your globals during your stun. Shadow strike the enemy, shadow dance, cheap shot, eviscerate, mark for death, eviscerate. So just in that single burst combo for PvE, without even PvP talents being available, I got 2 eviscerates that hit both crit at 15k back to back. We have about 31k health. Now in PvP with balancing and scaling, it's a little bit different numbers, but the theory is very similar. You're basically just trying to get back-to-back eviscerates into your target, trying to maximize your cheap shot so you can get the most amount of your prey in the weak. You're just shadow striking just to enable find weakness, because if you cheap shot in the opener, then you shadow dance, shadow strike, then you have less time during your stun. So you're trying to maximize the stun duration as much as you can. So sometimes you're doing it backwards with subtlety. Usually want to stun the enemy so they can't move, but now you're kind of trying to stun the enemy at last to maximize your damage rather than trying to crowd control the enemy. So it's very fun, and it's actually very cool. Chances are it's probably going to get nerfed in the future. But if you want to play subtlety when it comes to pure burst, pure just massive damage in the opener, it works out pretty well. So the setup again is shadow strike, so you get your buffs, shadow dance, cheap shot, burst, eviscerate, mark for death, eviscerate. And you can follow up with a cheap shot at the end there too. So you can get technically 3 shadow strikes in there. And that ends up being a fairly decent amount of damage. So here we go. That's one of the things that I like about subtlety is, it's weird because Blizzard wants us to maintain, and if you're playing a long-term fight, yes, you want to maintain Nightblade. It's a nice buff to put on a healer so that you can't really get as effective heals on them. Also, you deal 50% more damage, so in a sustained fight, it's better. But it's kind of a waste of a global when you're trying to just burst the enemy, do as much damage as you can. So it's awesome for subtlety to retain that kind of burst, even though we don't have things like DFA, even though we don't have all the artifact weapon abilities and effects in order to min-max our damage. It's cool that subtlety still, I guess, maintains all this possibility for maximum big burst. So that's one thing that you can enjoy with subtlety for now at 110. I've been enjoying it here and there. It's very fun on 120 because you have Azeroth bonuses that get involved in, and you have all the gear like endgame. Very, very cool to see how the spec is doing. And while it might not be the strongest for PvE, I feel like subtlety is a great spec for PvP at the very least. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. Hopefully this gave you guys a little bit of an idea where to start with your Subtlety Rogue. I will be honest, if you want to go for PvE, if you're somebody who wants to go for flat damage, you probably want to look at Subtlety and Outlaw when it comes to AoE or single target. But so if you want to play Subtlety just for the sake of playing your favorite specialization, just because you like the playstyle, and trust me, I get that. I played Outlaw all of Legion. Then hopefully this video helped you guys get together some information and some useful tidbits in order to maximize the damage for your specialization of Subtlety, be it single target, be it mythic pluses for PvE, or be it PvP, where I think the specialization will continue to shine. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if there's any specific classes, specializations that we want me to cover, or any specific videos kind of like these that I can make that are casually for any questions. I'm not really preparing myself to make any serious BFA guide videos until BFA is finally released with 120, level available, all the PvP gear available, because this is just pre-patch. It's just there for a little bit. It's not to be taken too seriously. The changes are not finalized. There's more class changes to be coming out, and of course the gear is going to change from the tier set bonuses towards the Azeroth bonuses, as well as lack of the legendaries. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see all of you guys in another video.